Marketing is about values.
Nike didn't call me and sell me this in a catalog. I bought this swoosh because it's ingrained in my soul.
When you have a product that really resonates with customers, the word of mouth grows like wildfire.
Welcome to the Marketing Max Show. Now, let's dive in.
Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Max Show. I am super excited to have Shaun on the podcast today. Shaun is the co-founder of one of my favorite marketing agencies. I don't even know if you guys would call yourself a marketing agency, but marketing service businesses in the game. They do something really unique that I think more companies should leverage as a client, but also more entrepreneurs can learn from as a business owner in the services space, whether you're in marketing or any sort of professional services. So Shaun, thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So you're the co-founder of Oddit, spelled Oddit, right? Oddit.co, but it's kind of a play on audit. Like I would audit your ad account or I would audit your email account. Talk to us a little bit about the founding story, how this came to be and what the product is.
So we, for about a decade, ran a fairly large product design agency, worked with a lot of big applications, Fortune 500 companies in there. Think really boring flows, but really complex flows. So like mass flight bookings, banking, that kind of thing. How do you make a government form get filled out more often? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Really boring shit, but paid really well. And got kind of exhausted of that agency world. It became more about how do I sell them more? How do I, just holding people's hands versus actually doing work.
Yeah.
So we sold that, and after we were, a couple of years out of that we were just private consulting really. We ended up kind of doing some mentorship or consulting on an agency in the performance marketing space. So he had a bunch of clients, spending anywhere from like 50 to 500K a month in ad spend on Meta, Instagram, Google, that kind of thing. And not really a space I had ever operated in, but we had scaled an agency to 100 people, and he was kind of at the start of something and said, hey, like, I don't know how to scale this. Can you guys help me out? So did some advising there. And in that process, it was kind of my first interaction with companies spending that type of money on paid ads. And as a product designer, I just couldn't make sense of why companies were spending so much money on the ad flows and the ad spend and the creative, but very little on their website. From the product design side, it still doesn't add up to me. Spending even $100K or $50K a month on your ads, and then, in a lot of cases, $0 on the website, which, from a UX perspective, the ad is click 1, and then the website is clicks 2 through 10. And so the balance just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
As part of that, helping out with that agency, we started doing UX audits, AUDIT. And just under that same kind of principle, like you're spending all this money here, let's fix the website because that's what's actually going to convert them once they're in that ecosystem. And so we just kind of gave UX feedback on the website, and we delivered them a little report saying, hey, try this. At that point in time, I didn't actually know what conversion optimization was, but apparently, found out that's what we were doing. And throughout that process of doing those, we saw all the ad metrics going up. So they were getting a higher ROAS, and all the numbers that they wanted to see go green and were. And so we kind of were like, oh, maybe we have something here. And so we spun it off into its own business and, branded it Oddit, and just kind of started sending out free ones to certain brands and brands that had a little bigger social presence. And it just kind of snowballed. I think what really caught people's attention with the product in the start was conversion rate optimization was really seen as a data play, where you look at your metrics, what's working, what's not, look at heat maps, pick 2 or 3 things that are clearly in need of help, test them, wait till you hit statistical significance with a certain amount of traffic, implement the winner. And that's a great approach. I recommend any brand that has the money and the traffic to be doing that. But a lot of Shopify brands don't have the traffic to actually do that. And a lot of the issues that we see across websites are all the same. It's all the same shit. They're not communicating clearly. They're putting up unnecessary barriers to just getting things into cart and checking out. And so by applying a lot of this just honestly common sense stuff to websites, it resonated with a lot of brands because, you know, a CRO agency is going to cost you $5 to $10 a month to run 2 or 3 tests, whereas we're auditing your entire website for $5 and giving you hundreds of recommendations of things to try. And so while it wasn't a data-based approach, one, the results were speaking for themselves. It works. We've done 10,000 of them now and have a really, really high success rate. But two, it was just more cost effective. And so we get a lot of people that are either leveraging us and a CRO agency, or they're just interested in getting their conversion rate higher or optimizing their website, but they aren't willing to get into a 3-month to 6-month contract with an agency, which we don't do. It's just a one-time fee.
So many questions, particularly on that last part about why you guys don't do that. But I want to kind of back up for anyone that's listened to this show, or certainly anyone that's read my newsletter. Everyone knows that I believe A/B testing on the landing page is by far and away the number one most impactful thing you can possibly do to improve your marketing immediately. No questions asked. Everyone knows my favorite tool on planet Earth is Unbounce, the A/B testing tool. I have an enterprise account with them. They're not a sponsor or anything, but I'm so passionate about A/B testing because, to your point, particularly for ecom, like the ad is click 1, but then in ecom, the website is clicks 2 through 10, and for B2B, the ad is the first thing, but then still on the landing page, like if it's a form, changing the tagline at the top of the form on that landing page, even if it's not multiple clicks going through multiple pages and checking out on like a e-commerce experience on B2B, literally changing the tagline at the top of the form or having one less question on the form can sometimes lead to a 50% or 100% increase in conversion rate, which can literally 2x revenue like overnight. So everyone knows that I'm a big fan of this. I guess, like, talk me through the early days of the product versus what it is now. Like, were you charging $5K back then? Is it a Loom video? Is it like what I would think of like a management consulting deck where it's like 50 slides and there's arrows pointing and it's, or is it a meeting? Like, what was the original version of the product and what does that look like and how has it changed today?
It actually hasn't changed a ton aside from aesthetically, like our brand has changed. But I think the way the product was set up was very much positioned to suit our lifestyle and our personal desires, right? I absolutely hate agencies. Somehow we've ended up a part of 5 of them, but we keep launching them. And I think our Oddit is very much so an anti-agency model. There's no feedback loops. So there's no like, hey, here's your deliverable. What do you think? I don't care what you think. I don't care what the customer thinks at all. If you don't like our ideas, that's fine. I'll give you a refund, but we're presenting you with what we think will be the highest converting version of your website. If there's any of those 100 things you want to do and the other 20 you don't like, it's all good. I gave you a really fair price point and you probably only paid for 30 and I just gave you 70 free. So the price point is positioned where we make good money on it, but it's really hard to argue that there's no value because it's so robust. And that was very intentional. We came out of 10 years running an agency. We knew what we were good at, but at the end of the day, we didn't want to run another agency. And an agency to me is feedback loops, client management, all that shit. We don't have a single account manager. We have one sales call and you don't get another call. There's no offboarding, there's no pitch. And that's why there's a report. The biggest thing that I saw in agency relationships was you end up pitching something to, let's say, the marketing manager or whoever is your cut point.
Yeah.
You pitch it to them, then they forward the email with the files to their team. And whatever was explained to them is then explained to someone else, to someone else, to someone else. And it just slowly gets a shittier and shittier representation of what we said. And so with Oddit, we just remove that completely. You get a report with every single change explained, shown, and why we did it. And it becomes really hard for the client to argue with it because none of the rationale is, because we think it'll look pretty. It's very, very based in what works and what doesn't, what's best for their brand, what aligns with their products catalog. And so we get, in the beginning, I assumed we were going to get constant argument and no one was going to buy it. But I think a lot of brands were in the same position mentally where we were, where they're sick of agencies too. They're sick of feedback loops and pointless Zoom calls and that type shit. So I think it really resonated with brands who were like, okay, this is different than what we're used to, but we're also not charging you for those calls, right? We're not charging you for all that crap. And I think they were okay with that. As long as the results were positive, what are you going to argue with me about? And so the product hasn't changed much because we started with that report in order to avoid client calls. And it hasn't really changed. We'll get the odd client where they'll buy a $5,000 report, but we know that they want to do every other page, or a VC fund that has 60 brands and they want to do every brand. And this is the first one.
Yeah.
And so we'll have a call with them to explain, hey, here's how it would work if we did more. But for the most part, it's a really hands-off business from the client side. And that's very intentional. I really expected us to get a ton of pushback on that. And to be honest with you, we've probably had, we have probably 30 sales calls a week for 3 years. And I've only had like 2 people on those calls be like, what do you mean there's no feedback loops? What do you mean that it was crazy to me. I was expecting like 50% to be like, this is stupid. How can you not let us have an opinion? But I think, the way we always explain it on that side of like, we actually don't want your opinion is, I think over a decade running a larger agency, every single failed project, and when I say failed, I just mean the client wasn't happy and, maybe there was issues paying the final bill because of that. Every single time that happened, the common thread between them is we gave them too much opinion, too much allowance for personal opinion, right? They'll come in and say, this is what we're thinking. This is what our team is thinking. Oh, and by the way, my nephew's a designer and he says that yellow isn't good for this. Right? Shit like that. It's just like, what the fuck you talking? It's so irrelevant. And every single time a project failed, it was because we gave the client too much input. And so, when we explain it to them that when you're hiring a professional, like you're hiring us for our knowledge base, and every time that you inject your personal opinion, it's very rarely an actual professional, it's a personal opinion. It just dilutes that and you make it harder for us to achieve what you hired us for. So when we explain to clients that way, it's like a 99.9%. They're like, yep, makes sense. Let's go. And so I think that was a really interesting pivot point for us, and where it really took off is we're like, okay, standing our ground on some of these kind of anti-agency policies we have is actually resonating with brands more than the other way around. So I think that was really where it started to snowball, is brands just love the low touch approach, but high value.
That makes total sense. I launched a newer agency a few months ago, and I'm seeing the same thing in the market. I guess for anyone listening, no matter when, it's early 2025, January 2025, as we're recording this. But like, it seems people don't want Zoom calls. People don't want a bunch of, going through the grapevine. People don't want multiple account managers. We're getting a shared inbox tool where everyone will have access to one email, team@marketingmax.io, for my team to be able to service clients. And so, just better communicating, hey, you don't actually have an account manager. We just sort it and push it to the right person who's going to be actually working on the account and inside of your account and doing the thing that you hired us to do. So there's not layers of management like there would be at a bigger agency. And people are really, really, really falling in love with that. So it makes total sense. You guys have kind of ridden that wave, or you guys kind of stuck up a flag in the ground earlier before I even started noticing this. And it just makes sense, right? Especially since we're all working from home and we want to be on less calls all the time post-pandemic. But I want to go back to something you said before about, you don't care what clients think after you deliver the deliverable, right? After you deliver the audit, the ODDIT, you don't care so much what people think. There's tons of value. If they implement it the right way, they're going to implement 1 or 2 things that is absolutely more or less guaranteed, and not technically guaranteed, but all but guaranteed to deliver a real outcome to justify that 5K. Take me to the other side of the process, though. When you're just starting with clients, you're taking 30 sales calls a week. I'm sure a lot of people are getting on the phone and they're like, I don't know if this is worth 5K. And particularly what we were talking about before, everyone focuses so much on ad creative. I've tweeted this 400 times. Everyone slaves away over the ad creative and then totally thinks that their website is set it and forget it. They forget that their website is clicks 2 through 10. As you said, I love that. But what are you doing or what are you saying on these calls to educate people and remind them that this is as important, if not more important, than the ad creative itself? Like, what is that messaging and how have you been able to, over the years running Oddit, kind of educate the target audience that you have that this is worth investing in?
It's actually very little pitching about the product, and very much we load up their website, and in most cases, 90% of cases, I don't even know what the URL is, right? Until we're in that moment. I haven't looked at the site, I haven't reviewed it. And so they get to see our perspective firsthand in a really real manner, right? I'm not coming in with all these notes and planning a pitch. They just load up their website and I rip it apart. And for the most part, nothing we're saying in the reports on those calls, nothing we're saying is like, holy shit, I've never thought of that. I've never seen that. This is groundbreaking. Never. I've never had that feedback. It's always, holy shit, this is so common sense. How did I not think of that? And I think when we position it that way, we do very little pitching about the actual product, right? At the very end, they're like, okay, well, which package do I need? And that's the last 2 minutes. But
Yeah.
for the most part, we just go through their site and show them what's missing, show them what can be optimized. And honestly, a lot of it, if they just recorded the call and listened it back, they could probably do most of it themselves, because I'm telling them all the answers on the call. But I think a lot of brands struggle to like I'm not designing it on the call, right? So they're not visualized. I'm giving all the ideas, but they're not sure how to visualize some of it. And so I think that's really where the sales pitch gets hammered home, is they understand that our perspective isn't necessarily unique or different. It's a completely fresh perspective to theirs from someone who understands e-commerce in general and user experience in general in a way that maybe they hadn't thought about before. It's really been our marketing and sales strategy since day one. We just talk through your website, and we haven't had a sales call where there's not something we can pick apart. And I think doing it cold like that, obviously not everyone can do that, but doing it cold where I'm actually seeing it, or our other team members are seeing it for the first time, and then pointing these things out, it helps us on the pitch of like, this is what users are seeing, right? Like, it's not pre-planned. The things I'm reacting to is me as a first-time user, a first-time visitor of your website. What do you think someone that just clicked your ad, scrolling through Facebook for 4 hours, and maybe it was an accidental click, maybe it was on purpose, but they have half a millisecond of information on your site, so on your brand or whatever, your product. And so when they land on your website, if you're not communicating clearly, like, they're back to Facebook, Meta, whatever, within seconds. And so I think a lot of the feedback that we give just resonates with people it's really just about positioning it and them understanding those simple little things, like how we're grabbing their attention on the ad and then compounding that into the website versus just launching up a Shopify template.
It's wild how many companies I've met with spend so much of their time on their competitor's website, but not their own website.
Yeah.
And this is evident, when I was running my agency 3 years ago before I sold it, we would oftentimes get ad copy feedback back. So we would create the ads for e-commerce clients, run the ads, optimize the whole funnel for them. But it was wild how the feedback we'd get on sometimes the first round of ad copy was, this isn't on brand. This messaging, this tagline, this isn't on brand. And we would screenshot literally word for word, character for character, that tagline or that sentence or that messaging from their website and say, we just took this from your website. You're telling us it's not on brand. And they would be like, oh. And it was awkward for them, almost always. 9 times out of 10, they say, I guess this is on brand. Go ahead and run it and let's see how it does. Like, people don't know what's even on their own website, but yet they're constantly emailing their agency, hey, our competitor just changed the website, or our competitor just launched this ad. And they're not thinking about all the time how they can better improve their own website, not just mimicking and copying, their competitors. You don't want to blend in with your competitors, but more so, to your point, common sense things that are not game changers when brought up, but game changers if implemented properly. So I guess my question for you is on those sales calls, like, what are maybe 1, 2, 3 things that you immediately look for that make people go, oh my gosh, that's not a game changer. I never thought about that, but that would be a game changer for us. Like, what are the maybe 2 or 3 most common mistakes or things that you guys recommend, particularly on those sales calls, that get people to go, OMG, we need to spend $5K on an audit right now?
One of the main ones is they really get stuck in that marketing mindset. So let's say that they've tested 10 different ads with really creative headlines, and those are intended to grab your attention within a millisecond and get you to click. And so really, you never know what's going to hit, right? Anything could be the one that grabs their attention. And they keep that mindset when they get to the website. And the kind of pitfall there is, once you've grabbed them and they're in the like you're in your whatever, your SaaS website, your e-com website, whatever. Once they're there, it's about clarity, not being cheeky or, trying to get creative or really brand heavy. There's aspects of that need to be injected, but a lot of them they really choose to be clever over being clear. And I think when it comes to conversion optimization and getting a higher return, it's a lot of just copywriting. Whether that's a button label, right? We see so many people, they use creative copy on button labels instead of just telling the user where they're going. A button is intended to just say exactly where they're going to go, right? Even as simple as saying shop versus shop bestsellers, shop men's, shop jeans. Where am I going? Am I going to shop all? Am I going to shop 10,000 things? One thing. The clarity on that button will increase clicks immediately because they're not thinking about it. They're not ending up in the wrong place, right? Maybe they clicked on it, they get there, like, oh, I wasn't looking for bestsellers, I was looking for new arrivals. Back. And now you're wasting a click, conversion dropping. So it's this simple shit like that of just being clear, instead of using a lot of the same tactics you would in marketing to drive a click. We're trying to drive 10, 15 clicks, right? It's not the same. You can't use that same mindset. That's probably the main one. The other one is where they're driving them. So we'll often ask them to where are you driving traffic from? What types of ads are you running? That type of thing. It's a very low part of, it's a small part of our audits. We don't actually look at your ads or anything, but I'm always interested in what they're doing and where they're driving it. And a lot of times they're communicating something that's going to grab your attention, and then they're just kind of spraying it to wherever on the website. And it probably should be a landing page, to your point, but they're not treating it like the ad is step 1, then the next header of the first page they land on is step 2. It's just, they have an ad, that ad is meant to draw attention, and then they're just whatever page we're going to see what converts highest, instead of trying to, have a story arc of like, okay, well, I said this in the ad. Okay, well, what's the next thing that should be said to keep them going? And there's always a disconnect there. A lot of times they're just tossing them onto a collection page with just 400 SKUs. And it's just, it just really putting it in the user's hand to find their way, and probably not the right strategy. And then the other part that a lot of brands just miss is their navigation. I think a lot of people land on your site and they either saw the ad or they didn't, but the nav can communicate so much about you and the products. And a lot of people just plug in whatever they see on a competitor site, or they plug in whatever Shopify has had in the template, right? And Shopify does a horrible job of telling you what to do and educating, right? They're just like, here's a template, do with it what you want. And so it's very similar where it comes to that clarity thing. Let's say they have a product name, like maybe it's we're working with a company and they have these devices that help cover your conversations from people trying to listen in. The product's called a harp, and in the nav it just says shop harp. And from my standpoint, I'm like, what is the device though? They just landed here, they don't know what that is. So they're going to click there because you're using internal nomenclature of what you name the product versus its function. That's probably one of the biggest pitfalls, is brands always are getting creative with the names of the products, which is fine. But in navigation, it's a functional part of your website. It's truly the index. So if I'm reading an index, how am I supposed to where I want to go if I don't know what I'm clicking on it, if it's just arbitrary naming that your creative team came up with? And so I think navigation is one of those areas where clarity is absolute king, and just helping push users to the right area faster, because the worst thing you can do for your conversion is getting them exploring things, being like, okay, fourth click, I finally found the thing I was looking for, but I didn't get there till now because it's all random words that the brand team came up with instead of, X device or descriptive, whatever the name or what it does.
Yeah.
So long story short, all of it comes back. Every piece of feedback does. Yeah, sorry, that was long-winded, but that's kind of the three things.
No, it's good. It's good. That's what the purpose of this show is all about, going deep and giving people practical examples. So to extend that a little bit longer, then instead of saying shop harp, what would be the thing that they should say? Shop listening devices, shop like the actual name of what the product is? Like, what would you rather see them put there instead of shop harp?
There's two ways we approach it. So like it could be, and this is something very few brands do, but it could be a 2-tiered system, right? Like instead of just showing your classic one word per, like just say harp, voice mix device. Like the space is there. Mobile, desktop, you have the space. It's just design, and it's a design problem, but you have the space. So in a lot of cases, it makes sense to just have both. Use it as a brand exercise to educate, right? Our product that does this is called this. Our product that does this is called this. To your point earlier, a lot of brands look to their competitors, right? Well, what are they doing? And most of the time, small brands, because most brands are small, they look to the best in class as their competitor. It's not a competitor, right? These brands are 50, 500 times the size of them.
Yeah.
And they just assume that because a big brand is doing it, it must be the right way to do it. And it's just not the case. It's not in any way, shape, or form the case. One, you don't know anything about their data. And two, brands that have a name or a presence or some trust built in the actual logo or name, they don't have to do as much explaining. They don't have to worry about conversion rate as much, because if Yeti pushes out a new cup or whatever, they don't need to explain it. People have trust that whatever they put out, it's going to be the best in class of what that product category is. And so there's no exploration needed. They'll just click around for hours and spend money, and it's not as big of a task for them. Whereas if you're a new company that's an Amazon reseller of shitty coffee travel mugs, you do have a lot of explaining to do. You do have to justify why you're even $20 less than them. You're still going to have to justify it more. And so referencing them and using them as your base case is just, it's a horrible approach, because their the conversion might be amazing for exactly that. It might actually not be great though, because they're so retail focused. Like there's so many different factors in play there where your competitors are really irrelevant from a UX standpoint, in my opinion.
One of our clients at my old ad agency was a co-working space, and they were always obsessed with the WeWork website. They were one location. WeWork is this multi-billion-dollar brand, and to your point, they look at who's best in class. And so they walked into one of our meetings one week, and they were like, I just noticed all of the pictures at WeWork's, or every single WeWork's like location page, and all the pictures on their website have pictures of people in them. And all of the pictures on our website have the office space empty. And he justified it. He's like, we did this because ours is higher end than WeWork. And, we bring in tables from Nicaraguan forests, and it's beautiful. And we have like really high end art that you would see at Art Basel on the walls. But WeWork has it. So I think they're onto something. And he went on like a 15-minute rant justifying how he's going to go spend $10,000 for a really high end photo shoot and get like models. And he's going to try to recreate every picture of the WeWork website with like the same like woman, age, ethnicity in the same like corner that's eating the same lunch. And he was going to recreate it. And we were doing some CRO for him as well. We got all of those pictures live on the website like a month and a half later, and conversions royally tanked. Absolutely 100% tanked. Like 70% lower tour, like book a tour requests. And I always think back to that example, because to your point, just because it works for a multi-billion-dollar company and best in class doesn't necessarily mean that it works for you. And in this particular case, it took away from like copying WeWork took away from their reason why you should choose this workspace in New York City over WeWork. It was the fact that it was so beautiful, and it really spoke to the people who cared about beauty and what forest, the wood from the table came from, compared to WeWork, where people wanted maybe the cheapest thing or the biggest office, and they wanted the all the amenities that WeWork has to offer.
Yeah, and that's a great example where, like, let's say WeWork did the same test and they had empty space and space with people. Because of the brand equity, it will have a lower impact in the test, right? They won't see a big differentiation likely. Whereas that small brand, when they go out and they find a bunch of models, as a small brand, you're trying to convince people, one, in this case, that their spaces are beautiful and unique materials, but you're also trying to convince people that there's fucking people there, right? That actually go to this place.
Yeah.
And you go and shoot a bunch of photos of people in it and they look like models and they look like fake people and they're holding up their iPad like this. People can smell stock photos from a fucking mile away. And the second that you plan that photo shoot in a space that's supposed to be active, full of entrepreneurs, it's instant you can tell that it's not real people. And so I would say that if you would have done that exact same test and just walked into the space with an iPhone and shot some photos of real people doing real work in that space, it probably would have actually made a difference, or at least converted better than the model. And it's because with smaller brands like that, you really do need to build trust by showing people they're not the guinea pig, right? No one wants to be the person in the space that's sitting alone while they're trying to find more tenants, right? They want to be in there. That's part of being in a co-working space. Yeah, it's space, but you want to be a part of a vibe, a culture, feel like there's something to work off of in terms of like people pushing you. And I think if you ruin that when you put models in that, because people can tell.
You mentioned taking the website without any pictures on it. What they did, which was add a bunch of pictures that were like very clearly, high-end photo shoots, cameras, lighting, the whole 9 yards. And then a third option of you or your suggestion of doing it more candid, right? Making it more approachable.
Yeah.
You said you don't do any of the CRO tests ongoing, right? That's not your model. I don't think you guys will ever do that, maybe in the future. But talk to us a little bit about tech stack, right? Like if I wanted to test those 3 different things, because you're the CRO expert, what do you recommend in terms of analytics tools, A/B testing tools? What tech stack does your best clients come to you and say, hey, we have Unbounce and Google Analytics and Triple Whale or whatever. Like, if someone wanted to really take CRO seriously and run these tests, do you have a favorite tech stack, a few favorite tools that you love?
Our customers are really polarizing in that majority of them, they don't actually have the traffic to run true split tests, right? They don't have enough traffic to run more than one test every 3 months just based on traffic, right? Because most CRO agencies, they want 50 to 100,000 unique sessions to establish a winner. Don't have that. And so what they end up doing is, instead of testing a headline change, they're testing an entire header, like every aspect of it changing at once to try and get bigger differentiation in the test. In terms of tools, it's a hard one. I think that for at least those smaller brands, the main thing that I think a lot of them should be using is some sort of heat map tool. Whichever one, there's a lot, like heatmap.com. There's a bunch of great heat map tools out there. And I think just like when we're reviewing websites as a user, it's the best data you can access, right? Because so many brands will go in and they'll start changing things or tweaking things, and they're just not tweaking in the right position. Like they're not in the right place. If you look at your heat map, the first part of the page gets 98% views because 2% left because your site's too slow. Second section gets 80, 70, 60. And by they're at the bottom, 1 in 10 users sees it. And so it's, why do any changes there? You could probably put family photos down there and customers will never notice. Like it is so ineffective. And so it's really just about finding the right areas to test. And I think heat mapping is a big part of that. The other side of our clients are really big brands that have an entire internal testing team. And they're not actually hiring us to try and solve that problem of how do we test? What do we like? They use us as a data, like a creative data bank. Just, hey, we're going to get 100 ideas from Oddit, and then we're going to spend a year testing them with our own team instead of having our team come up with all of it and design all of it and waste all that time. I think landing pages in general is something that every brand should be testing. I think before you change anything on your site, put all those assumptions in a landing page, see if it works, right? Test it against your page, test it against your collections page, test it against your product page. I think Unbounce is a great one for that. Replo, we've seen customers have success with. There's a great Figma to live page one. There's a ton of great like right from design file to pretty much functioning tools out there right now. I think that the biggest thing for me is just making sure that if you're not going to use like us or like any type of testing agency is using a heat map or even just simple user tests. I think go to usertesting.com and get 3 random people to try and complete a task, right? And just watch them. Just watch the video, watch where they get stuck. That's all I'm doing. I'm just doing without watching them. All I'm doing is approaching it like a user and seeing where I get confused or seeing where it doesn't matter if male, female, it doesn't matter if they're even looking for your product or interested in your product. It does not matter. It can be 50 years old, 20 years old. You're just looking for people that can go through a test or an experiment on a user test with a goal, right? You've told them go add size 32 jeans to cart, whatever the task is. And just watch where they stall. Where does their mouse hesitate because they're confused? That's all you really need to do. I think a lot of it comes down to just accessing the right info, and whether it's through a heat map, through a user test, and then not implementing it carelessly. Like to your point, landing pages is everyone talks about it and they're like, oh yeah, but actually doing it properly to me means launching a landing page, seeing what works, and using that as your testing ground for what to change on your main website. I would personally never change my main website until I've tested something on a landing page. What worked? What didn't? Okay, that worked really well. Okay, now let's test that one piece on the homepage. Did it work there? Yes, no? Okay, either keep it or leave it, then go back to the landing page, test something else. What if we tried this? Okay, let's test it on an ad set to a landing page, see what works. If it works, move it to your primary website and just keep that cycle going. I think too many people try and update their website way too often, for one, way too drastically as well. I don't even think that answers the question, but
yeah, I mean, in terms of the tech stack you're saying is best for companies to optimize CRO, some variation of a heat mapping tool. Heatmap.com is a friend of the podcast, Dylan Ander. Replo to A/B test, landing pages specifically for e-com brands. I use Unbounce. Again, not affiliated with Unbounce at all. I just literally love them. Yeah, I should probably sign up for their affiliate program, although I don't really do affiliates because I've sent so many people their way. The problem that I have with Unbounce, particularly as it pertains to this conversation, is they don't integrate with any e-com platform very well. So that's why most of my clients, most of my work is B2B. But it seems like most of your clients are e-com. What is that, like an 80-20 split e-com to other, or 70-30?
yeah, it's probably 80-20. The 20 being, everything from SaaS companies to service companies to, we've audited airlines, we've audited Carnival Cruise Lines, we've audited anything you can think of that would be in that other 20 bucket, universities, stuff like that. How do we get enrollment up? So, but yeah, it's 80% e-com just because of the nature of how fast that grew over COVID when we were starting.
I didn't know you guys have done like Carnival Cruise Lines and airlines. That's pretty amazing. You are the go-to website optimizer, maybe.
I mean, I think when it's those types of companies, we're at that price point where they're just kind of like, why not? You know what I mean? Like, because it's not a traditional agency, right? If an agency world, the farmer's market mom and pop comes to me and I'm charging them $500, and then American Airlines comes to me and I'm charging $50,000.
Yeah,
I don't care who you are. Oddit the price. You buy it on our website. The price is the price. So I think they like that part of it where there's no contracts. There's no.
Yeah.
They're so used to high touch accounting relationships that I think ours is a breath of fresh air for them. So it's almost like, yeah, we'll take a flyer on it. Why not?
Have you read the book or heard of the book called Built to Sell?
No, I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
Strongly recommend reading it. I read that book about 2 years into my agency journey, my first agency, and I implemented it. We 2 or 3x'd our top line revenue in like 60 days after implementing everything in the book. You've implemented most of the things in the book, but it really preaches having one price, one product, at one price point that you sell over and over and over again. Your margins are the same. You know how to hire or who to hire. You're not like a full service agency where it's like, oh, I don't know if we're going to get more retainer clients, so I need to go hire more people to fulfill the retainer work, because that's a little bit different than the audit work. So you kind of exemplify that. I guess one or two final questions here, specifically on the agency side, since I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast are agency owners. You're booking 30 calls a week for a one-time product, not recurring, productized agency, if you will. Where are most of those leads coming from, and how are you booking 30 calls a week now, 3 or 4 years into the business?
Yeah, it's we've probably spent in 3 years 20 grand total on marketing. Usually it's newsletters, stuff like that, where we just try and test out new things. But
yeah,
almost all of it is organic. 99% of it is organic and word of mouth. So we get 2 or 3 emails a day of like, so and so who runs so and so said you guys increased conversion here, we'd like to book a call. That's one of the biggest. Twitter, we get a ton through Twitter. Our content pretty much hasn't changed for 3 years. It probably should at some point, but
what is the content, and is it from your personal accounts, or is it from like the audit page?
From the audit, we never talk about our actual products, which is an interesting approach, but we never talk about our products. We just show before, after. Here's what this site looks like. Here's what we would change about it, and here's why. And that's 90% of our tweets. The other 10% is like, hey, listen to the podcast we were on, or listen, go to the webinar we're hosting. And so that, we host a ton of free webinars. We have one with Heat Map every month. We have one with Creative OS. We're doing one with Fairmat next month. And so a lot of that is similar to those sales calls. I'm just going in and talking through my opinion on their website and showing them, because they're submitting them live on this thing. And so they're seeing like a first-time user reacting, but someone who can probably explain why things are happening better than a normal user could. And we get a lot of calls booked out of that, where they're like, I never thought of that. I'd love to hear more. And so it's I don't know. I think we could really see a huge revenue spike if we did do paid advertising. But we just haven't cracked that yet. And honestly, I'm not one of those guys that's like, we don't have some crazy aggressive path of growth where we want to become this, $5 million company. We're all very comfortable. We don't have to work nights. We all have kids. It's a great little business that does well and grows at a really sustainable rate without any advertising. And I don't really want to change that, to be honest.
Partnership marketing in the e-com services and software space is so incestuous. And I mean that in a good way.
Yeah.
That it makes sense that you guys are able to generate 30 calls a week on the back of organic between Twitter and webinars with other platforms. I think a lot of companies struggle with that, and particularly a lot of agencies struggle with that, because they're the same as every other agency. They offer the same service for roughly the same price. And the reason why you should choose them over someone else is they have better case studies, or their team is smarter, or they'll try to beat you on price, where you guys have something truly unique, truly different with Oddit. Shaun, I want to thank you so much for being here on the Marketing Max show. I'm a really big fan. I've been a longtime admirer of your business model, because it fits so well in that built to sell model that's talked about in that book. And just because I think, as I mentioned before, optimizing your website, optimizing your landing pages is by far and away the number one most impactful thing you can do to move the needle for your business. And I'm not saying that to try to sell anyone anything. Like, I don't even have an A/B testing CRO offer. I'm not competing with Oddit at all. I just genuinely believe that in my experience. If people want to check out you or Oddit, where can they go?
You can go to our website, oddit.co. You can submit for a free trial. Basically, all that is you submit any URL on your site, and we'll send you back a part of it redesigned with the rationale of why it should change within usually 48 hours. There's no credit card, like nothing. There's no obligation. We don't force you to book a sales call. It's, to be frank, just free work. So definitely anyone listening, go do it. And then our Twitter is It's Oddit, ITSODDIT. Again, it's not super salesy. You won't hear a bunch of, founder story crap. It's just value, just education. That's mostly every single tweet. And then if you want to follow me personally, it's my last name, IFY. So BRANDT IFY. And then, yeah, if you want us to look at your website, just go to our site, book a discovery call. It's basically just us going through your site with you for 30 minutes and helping you understand what's going on.
I highly recommend everyone go and check out oddit.co, get a free audit. No reason not to. Thanks so much for being here, Shaun. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, man.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Max show. It takes me and my team hours to produce it every single week, but it only takes you 15 seconds to hit that share button and text it to a friend, drop it in a Slack group, or share it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or any of your favorite social platforms. I appreciate you taking the time to check out my content. Have an awesome day.